The regular meeting of the David Douglas School Board to order. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting. Our exec session ran a little over. But we'll get, I keep forgetting we don't have our student body president anymore, and I'm so used to going straight to them. So I guess we'll start with attendee input, and Chris Conklin.
Hey, hello board. My focus continues to be on the children at Mill Park Elementary. Tonight I'm intrigued on how you, the board, are putting Mill Park out of your mind for more important things. To have taken the role of a board member, you are undertaking a massive volunteer effort for a position that does not have a direct benefit. It must bring great pride as you tell others you are a board member at David Douglas. While you vote as a group, each of you has your own motives for holding this position. Whatever your personal goals for this position, I would like to remind you of the gravity of the responsibility to the community. You are the reason our district leaders will not come to grips with the failures of Mill Park. The district website outlines board responsibilities. It states that the board determines the long-range direction of the school district, employs and oversees the superintendent, and communicates with the community. Pardon me and all the other disenchanted parents from laughing when we are reminded of what you're supposed to be doing. These statements sound like some fairy tale that we want to be true, but have no bearing on the reality in the room today. Is there an elephant in the room that you can see but we can't talk about? I try to imagine Frida reminding you all behind closed doors that most of the kids at Mill will never succeed no matter what we do. Maybe you like Ken and can't picture him treating anyone poorly. But really, why is it that you don't address this failing school when it has been a problem for so many years?
I would not attribute comments to me that I didn't make.
I'm just supposing. I'm trying to figure out why we're silent about Mill Park. We're completely silent about it, and it is a problem. And it's not a problem for us personally, it's a problem for the kids. I'm not trying to create a problem for us personally. But really, why is it that you don't address this school that has been a problem for so many years? I know you are good people. Some of you are active in your faith. Some of you are dedicated parents of students in our schools. Some of you are involved in other aspects of our community. But most of you have enough conscience in you to be able to be bothered when you know others are being mistreated. Do you smell corruption in the district when Mill Park kids are failing and nothing is changing over the years? I hope it leaves you at times without rest until you find out what is really going on. Thank you.
I invite you, Mill Park will be speaking on their special grant next. Okay, all hands raised. Do you want to introduce Dan, or should I?
Well, I know Dan will introduce himself, but please come on up, Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, Ryan, director.
Yeah. Oh.
Hi, Dan. Come on up, please. Welcome. Just settling in. This is quick. Yeah, it looks like we have some handouts, and I believe it's chapter 4. As you guys know, Chris, grab one of the chairs. Yeah, any one of those chairs.
I guess he's got you working tonight too.
Sir, thank you. Yeah, there's slides. Do I have what? Did he ask if I had like the thumb thing or don't have it?
I don't have.
That's what I sent yesterday.
You sent it to Lori, do you recall? Okay.
hard than
Sounds
you
like
think.
we're doing some technology and getting some
Yeah.
slides ready for the presentation. Great.
Is this on?
That's off. That's off. Yeah, one more, and that's on.
There.
Perfect.
Red light is good.
There you go.
Okay.
Light is good.
I thought it was bad. Well, I can go ahead and get started. Slides will find their way, I'm sure. So, good evening, Board Chair Christopher. Frida, hi, you're the Board Chair. I'm looking this way, glad my glasses can see, and the fellow board members and Superintendent Richardson. I'm delighted to be here. We come about every year, but we definitely come when we put out a recent chapter publication. This group, this partnership was founded in 2010, and it was sparked by really the horrific graduation rates in Multnomah County, throughout the county. And the mayor at that time in the city of Portland built a team that was going to look at this, and then there was a group called Leaders Roundtable that had been meeting for about 28 years on things like this. Well, they were meeting really the same week at the same time, just one day apart, kind of having the same conversation. So they decided, wouldn't it be a great idea if we merged forces and became a real partnership countywide? And that was the impetus. And we were the Portland Schools Foundation at the time, and I was just sitting in those meetings. The next thing we were it. And it became quite a mobilization of forces to say that we can't just be one school district. We really need to look at all 7 school districts in Multnomah County. And also we need to look at the wraparound services, because the schools can't do it alone. And there was too much blame actually going on in the 18% of the time that the children were in schools, when in fact we need to improve our services in the evenings and the weekends and the summers. So that's the totality of the partnership. Thank you so much. Yeah. Is it just me? It's hard.
He's going to turn off the light.
Oh, it's brightening up. Okay. Kind of like my voice is gradually trying to find itself. Anyway, so that was the beginning of it. And we didn't have a blueprint. We still really don't. And there was also, it wasn't a funded mandate. It was an inspiration. And so we took this on because we knew it was the right thing to do for kids. And also we had a lot of community, almost pressure to say, let's figure this out. I was delighted that it was encompassing the entire county. So one thing that was really clear from the beginning is that this group from Cincinnati, actually called Strive Together, they were doing this cradle tree to say that we really need a movement of cradle to career, and that a lot of markets are program rich and system poor. So we all know there's a lot of programs, and if all of them were properly funded and hitting it out of the park, we probably wouldn't have any problems. But the fact is, there was a lack of coordination and collaboration oftentimes between the two. We're sometimes more competitive than we are collaborative. And so what we have many times, and even still do today, is you kind of see that current and old behavior where there's some wonderful bright spots, but they're not always, the dots aren't always connecting. And so how could we have better alignment so that the handoffs are better? Just like when you're raising children, you know, it's the crucial handoffs with the other adults that help you get between each nexus. So that was kind of, that was definitely the inspiration. Again, great vision, great clarity about what we want, very aspirational, but no one knew what that was really going to look like. And again, I was the CEO in this job wondering what we had just gotten ourselves into. And so I'm going to move to the next one. So then we put together an amazing council, which included all the superintendents in the market, the mayor, the chair of county government, and a lot of business CEOs. And we decided that we needed to have a dashboard that was clear and concise, and one that we would stick with. And the good news is that 8 years later, the goalposts haven't moved, and we've really stuck with these benchmarks from birth weight all the way to connected to a career. And we went from about 50 of these benchmarks from Portland State University, narrowing it down to a more, market digestible size of 12. Then it was time for us to get really clear about our footprint, and the group decided that it would be the districts of this county, the primary districts of this county, including MESD. So those are the 7 districts. One thing that I think a lot of us know is that the demographics were changing at that time. They've only become more solidified. I would say the biggest ones to note is Portland Public, the poverty rates have gone down considerably over the last 10 years. And I would say Gresham Barlow's had probably the reversed uptick. And so what a lot of us knew is that gentrification was really a stronghold in inner Portland, and that the city of Portland was actually more than just Portland Public Schools. So we finally caught up with what all of you already knew at David Douglas School District. But the real impetus again about this was the fact that we were failing too many of our kids, and we really were failing a lot of our populations disproportionately. I think the one that always stuck out to me the most was, even though this is the morally right thing to do, this has always been an upstream economic development plan for the region, prosperity plan. And when your largest population, an emerging market, is the Latino population, and they are our future employers and employees in the mass scale, it wasn't okay that when you factor it out 6 years after graduation, if you look at a 9th grade class, only 12 of the 100 Latino students would finish a college degree. So like everything, it was a lot of work to get on the same page, but diagnosing the problem is very important, but then it's how are we going to get into some solution. The groups decided that we narrowed in on what I think a lot of parents would find affirming: the transitions, the handoffs, the kindergarten transition, the transition from 8th grade to high school, and then the transition from high school to post-secondary. It's key that we use the word post-secondary because we've expanded the North Star to include, of course, not just a college degree, but also having a profession in the trades in manufacturing and construction, which had a lot of need, and there really was no pipeline to speak of in the market. In addition to that, we wanted to look at social emotional issues that often are too complex for a lot of us to dive into. And those are many factors that are below the iceberg. So looking at attendance, it's not something that you blame the teachers on, but you look at it as a society issue, that we have so many complex issues, whether it's addictions, domestic abuse, housing insecurity, you name it. There's all these factors that lead up to why a student won't be able to get to school on time. And it's very seldom because they don't want to be there. And the other one that's very complex and important is looking at disproportionate discipline. Why is there sometimes a bias in how we discipline our children based on race, and having those honest conversations? So those are our work areas. Throughout the county and all these districts, you see those dots. Those are our activities that are going on. We call them our school community work. I call them sometimes our laboratories. It's where we meet and we test practice. At each site, there's teams that come together that look at the data together, and they look at their own school's data, and we make sure it's current. So if there's an attendance issue in the month of October, we analyze it in the month of November at least, instead of 2 years later. As you know, in education, we've had a lot of challenges with lagging data, and it's sometimes very difficult to be urgent to what is needed for the school. And so we've seen a lot of results by building those, sometimes messy, and they're not perfect, but at least it's some data that the teachers and the counselors can all get behind. And I want to acknowledge how important it is to engage the teachers and the counselors and the social workers in this work. This is a ground-up movement. Even though we had to start 8 years ago, bringing along the influential people in the market, it's really now been about building from the ground up. And this is a slide that gives that some focus. This is basically our system, the community-wide organizational chart. So you take those 22 community sites where you do continuous improvement work, which we really just stole from the manufacturing and sector, and also we stole it from aerospace. They do these, they call it Six Sigma. It's continuous improvement. It's very wonky. And so it's been really fun, at least for me, to figure out how to translate that into the social space. We don't use any of those words or we'd lose all of the teachers and counselors in the meetings, but we adapt the language so that we can really just stay focused on data, look at practices, test them, and see which ones are working, and sometimes, more importantly, which ones aren't. And it comes from them, not from a mandate on high. Then they take what practices are working, and they work with peers around the county. So, for example, I do facilitation at 3 middle school sites, and that's at George Middle School in North Portland, Centennial Middle School, Reynolds Middle School, and they were all noticing that if they had a very focused, rigorous homeroom advisory period at the beginning of the day that's 20 minutes, it's relational, It's not taught by one of the teachers that will give them a grade later on. It gets to a very fundamental fact that middle school kids sometimes don't feel seen. And so when you have that foundation, if you will, at the beginning of the day, we saw the climate, the culture improve at all those sites. And so as peers, they learn from one another. So what's beautiful about this work is that it really is spread by peer-to-peer contact. Again, not by another mandate from on high, but from fellow teachers and counselors and social workers that they can trust. Then we bubble it up to the leadership groups and eventually to the council, which includes Superintendent Richardson. We chase practice, not money, is really what this is about. And we do think practice eats policy for lunch, and how. Principle for Almost a Day is something that keeps this work relational and also keeps building empathy from our business community, so that even though everyone thinks they're an education expert because they went to school once, they really aren't. And it's really important for them to sometimes set foot inside a school, maybe the first time in decades, and maybe the first time ever in a public school setting where it's multicultural. And they can really, I've seen so many business leaders have a very humbling experience, and they show up very differently at our board meetings after they've done Principle for a Day. So sometimes people act like this is just a soft day and it's just fun and it's not really necessary. That's not true. This is at the heart of how we get to system change, is building that empathy from our leadership. It's not a photo op, it's a chance to really dive in and understand and build that empathy in the schools. Industry for a Day is kind of a flip of that. So with Principle for a Day, again, it was a business community coming out into the schools. Industry for a Day would be that is this story. We have a stigma in our education system for the most part that it's college or bust. And most of our educators, not their fault, come from a culture of college-going culture, a lot of Bachelor of Arts degrees, if you will, in high schools and middle schools. And not a lot of people have had experience in the trades. And so this day, just in 3 years, it's gone from 45 teachers and counselors around the county to, how many do we have this year? 200 and some. We were packed. We sold out. It's on here? Yeah. Okay. Oh, and 28 from David Douglas itself are there. Thank you. And what they do is they put on hard hats, and I have no idea what they're wearing there, but I think it was very important for them to wear all of that. So they go into the industries themselves, and they are exposed to some absolutely fascinating careers where you earn while you learn, careers where you lose your hands and you're innovative and creative, and also quite lucrative. And so it's been fascinating to see, such as this quote that you see from one of your English teachers at Ridge, to explain the insight and the ahas that they experience on that day. In fact, when we're recruiting, we always say it'd be really important to focus on the popular English or history teacher that probably knows nothing about trades and construction, and they're the ones that usually have the biggest aha experience. And I think that's helpful, because then when they're with their students and they have a student that really doesn't want to go to college yet, they can offer this opportunity. Too often it's always been college or maybe military or good luck at Walmart. It's like we need to have other options. And the grain tsunami that's hitting the workforce is pretty phenomenal. There's going to be 10,000 open jobs, highly paid jobs in the market over the next 10 years, and we right now don't know how we're going to fill them unless we continue to improve this system. So I just wanted to give you basically a big picture overall setting for where we are with Chapter 4. I want to close. There are narratives of how this work is evolving. We're a nationally acclaimed Cradle to Career network, one, because I think we are a pioneering site, and we've actually survived for 8 years, and we have some results which you'll see in Chapter 4. We wanted to make sure it wasn't an annual report. It didn't need to be punitive. What it needs to be is an honest assessment of how adults are doing with our children, and all adults, again, not just the educators, but everybody in the community. They're all our children. So it's a movement that's also bringing that together. I'm going to turn it over to Amber and Chris to talk about ninth grade counts, right? Well, first Lincoln Park Elementary. Yeah.
Hello, Amber Klingner. I'm on the partnerships team at All Hands Raised, and I have the privilege of facilitating many of our school site improvement teams, as well as the ninth grade counts collaborative. We've been at Lincoln Park now for 3 years working on reducing disproportionate discipline, and they have really come a long way. This year, they've brought a new level of intentionality to their teaming systems to prevent duplication of work and really make sure kids are getting what they need and adults have the tools that they need to give those kids what they need. And they've also been actively engaging, as Dan said, how the 3 middle schools came together to talk about advisory periods. Lincoln Park really dives in deep with other elementary schools across the county to learn what's working there and to share what's working for them. We are heading into our 11th summer of 9th grade counts, which is a network of summer transition programs that offer at least half an elective credit to incoming 9th grade students for their participation. David Douglas has really leaned in deep on this strategy, and you give every middle schooler going into 9th grade that opportunity to engage with the programs. And that kind of recruitment and scaling is really not the norm across the county. And I'd like to introduce Chris Matthews, who's a lead teacher in 9th grade counts and has been with it from early on to talk a little more about the program.
So again, I'm still my number one job. I'm one of those people that needs to go to industry for a day, probably. Although we do work to, talk about more authentic modes of communication, not just preparing kids to be English majors, because that's not huge numbers on that. And so, really, I was great to sort of get a sense of it and be one of the writing teachers for that program, and then was able to take over in 2016. And as you can see, work on our recruitment and getting more students in the program. And so it was really a great opportunity to collaborate with middle school counselors, for one. I've been a middle school teacher before. I know how difficult it is. And just sort of building connectivity between the schools. It's easy in some cases for, middle school to, not always, oh yeah, we're preparing them for high school. And us as high school teachers, our thing that we don't always, keep in mind enough is what are we preparing them for? And so I think when we can provide connectivity, I can work with the middle school counselors to talk to me about what students would benefit from the program. That was really helpful, and really keeping tabs on students from, starting with the summer before their freshman year and really making sure that they have a home at David Douglas and they have lots of adults, outside agencies, teachers, to be there as sort of an advocate for them throughout their time. So really the program has evolved. We do offer 1 full credit if kids do STEM electives, which they have a chance to do again this year. So my last year running it was 2017. Now I'm the summer school principal, and Angela Landy is our 9th grade counts coordinator last year and this year. And so we've really tried to use some of those trades and industries and, the things that will really, in addition to the academic support, learning about the school, becoming comfortable with it, that there's also that tie into these really cool, innovative things that David Douglas High School is able to offer, and that, we build these other partnerships. And so I think the chart kind of speaks for itself. Primarily 9th grade counts is the recruiting task is to recruit students who are academic priority, but really, students want to come to our program or other 9th grade counts programs for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're unsure about school, maybe they just have some sort of anxiety, or really just kind of staying engaged over the summer. So basically, our numbers, as you saw, they look pretty good. There's certainly more we could do. But I think what was really cool for me is this year, so again, I taught 9th grade counts like 3 years ago. So I actually taught in English for like 6 or 7 students that I had as little 8th graders coming in. And so that sort of personal connection, sort of them having me or other teachers in the program to say hello to. We've had Latino Network come in the past. We've had really strong involvement with ERCO. And so it really can become a center point for providing those incoming freshmen with what they may need to get through. It's a series of factors, obviously, that help them get through and graduate. Sometimes it's a great outside agency that they've worked with. Sometimes it's a teacher, and so really just sort of keeping that in mind, I think, is extremely helpful. In terms of the meetings that I've been a part of and that we've participated in, it can be hard to bring all these groups together to sort of for a shared mission. So I think the way that we've done it this year, which was helpful, is to have sort of smaller meetings. So we were able to meet with Naya and a couple other people from All Hands Raised. And so the smaller meetings obviously allow a little bit more of a depth to our conversations. and basically it's been helpful. I don't go to the meetings as much anymore since I'm not the ninth grade counts coordinator, but looking at the data, who's participating, where are we still falling short in terms of graduation rates, and so sort of troubleshooting together the different things that all of our districts out this way and are struggling with, and thinking about how to, work students along that continuum that Dan mentioned earlier. So I'll throw it back to Dan.
Ninth grade counts actually was the impetus to get this started. So when we were looking at graduation dropout data, there was a real key data point that said if you have 6 credits by the end of freshman year, you're 4 times more likely to graduate on time. And so getting the 0.5 credit going into freshman year for the academic priority students who were identified as probably not graduating unless we start to do intervention. And we all know that at the end of middle school is kind of one of your last chances sometimes to do thoughtful, thorough intervention. So it's really been, when we look at the longitudinal data, it's always a double-digit spread, just barely over 10%, but it always sounds great to say double-digit difference between those who do ninth grade counts and those who do not in the same cohort. Those who do it graduate on time at a rate that's always over 10% higher. So it's one of those high-impact strategies that's really not that expensive. And at the bones of All Hands Raise is that we are here to collect the community assets that already exist. It's not about new money. It's about programs that are already existing and how can we more efficiently weave them together to have greater impact. That's what it means by being not just program rich, but also system rich. And we continue to look creatively at those efficiency equations. And we're grateful to partners that are willing to know that maybe they don't have all the answers. Maybe we could look at fresh data and try some new practices and keep improving. The kids are always ready to keep improving. They're always resilient, but man, we adults can be stubborn. So it's really been a challenge with a lot of headwinds to corral and herd the cats to try new ways of working together as a community, not worrying about where our payroll is, but knowing that they're all our kids. I'm looking at you, Director Barber. You're connected to a ninth grade counts program because I've met you before. It's the one at Warner Pacific that's called. Do you want to say anything about it? Do you want to be a part of our presentation?
You have to turn on your.
I'll just say that we have enjoyed the partnership very much. Just even for the opportunity to get to hear about the other programs that are going on throughout the county and the data that is shared with us on a regular basis, those things have been very helpful as we've been a new and growing and developing program. So we've enjoyed the partnership with All Hands Raised and ninth grade counts very much.
Thank you. It's Director Barber, it's great to hear about one of the things that works for you and it adds value is connecting with the other programs. Part of the isolation that we have to break down is just that often we live in the same market, but we're not connecting with learning communities that are doing the same exact work that we're doing. We don't need real expensive professional development trainers to come in to put that together, but we do need someone to steward that type of convening, and that's what All Hands Raised tries to always do. So I appreciate hearing that. It's just like when the middle school teachers and counselors were probably talking about this for a long time in the isolation of their schools, but then when they saw Reynolds Middle School pull it off, then George moved theirs from after lunch to before school because they saw better outcomes. Centennial's been talking about it, they said, for 4 years, and now they're implementing their advisory next year. So there is that real gift that isn't from a big grant from on high, but just from the relationships, actually having a chance to connect with one another. So, yeah. There's, if you're curious to learn more about these organizations, David Brooks writes for New York Times, and he writes about the Weavers, and we're one of the organizations that he's referring to. And he actually said we're an example of the good government that still exists in this kind of cold civil war that we're living in. So it's relational at its root, although everything is jump-started by looking at data just to keep it objective and pure. Is there another one? Oh. Any questions?
Do any of the board members have any questions? I guess I did have one on the map with the dots that showed the different, I gotta find it. the different types of programs like reducing disproportionate discipline and stuff. It was back a few. It seemed like, is Lincoln Park the only school doing that?
In David Douglas, yeah, we have one site at Lincoln Park and then the ninth grade counts program.
And,
We're in dialogue about some others as a
but
superintendent.
there's only one in PPS.
Pardon me?
There's only one in PPS?
Yeah, with the disproportionate
yeah, but-
discipline, right, that's George Middle School up there in the north. Yeah.
You just hear in the press about that all the time in Portland Public, and so it's kind of interesting. There's only one actually focusing in on it in Portland Public.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Racial equity is a focus with every part of our aspect of the work. We believe that you're not doing racial equity work unless you're measuring it, and you have to get away from the platitudes and make equity a verb. So.
Yeah, I remember when Lincoln came, the first year they had gotten a grant, and they discovered it at that time, the disproportion was to boys and girls more than anything, and they made some changes to give boys more time to run around.
You
Because
just nailed it, yeah.
Yeah, young boys have to work off their energy.
Yeah,
So.
my mother raised 7 boys, and she'd make us run around the block before dinner. Yeah.
Okay,
Some old school strategies don't just continue to work.
Ken?
Yeah, so I'd just like to thank all of you for the presentation and recognize Chris. Thank you. Last day with students tomorrow, so thanks for all your work this year. And just happened to be 98 degrees yesterday. I'm not even going to ask how warm it was in this classroom, but thank you for finishing off. And then ultimately recognize, and I hopefully not embarrassed, and I know most of the people at this table probably know, but Dan won't mind me sharing that this is his last year as executive director of All Hands Raised, and I just want to specifically thank him for his work. And even if it wasn't his last year, I'd be thanking him for his work because he's truly a champion for kids in our county. His leadership, his voice, his ability to network, his ability to pull people together, be reflective, think, and ultimately make change is felt. So you will be missed. I don't know exactly what your plans are or not. I'm not using the retirement word, as you can see. I think it's more of just change. But I want to thank you for your work. Thank you for the partnership, and we're excited to continue with All Hands Raised. And obviously, excited to see your work as well. So, thank you.
You're most welcome. I wanted to end with just thanking you all for you always tend to participate in our annual fundraising event. And it's a big deal because we're 100% privately supported, and all of our work is pro bono. We don't send an invoice to David Douglas. And so we do $1.5 million of pro bono professional development services around the county, and we have to pay for it somehow. So we have a really fun party. We ask Portlanders for one night to stop taking themselves so seriously. It's very hard to do, and get them to just laugh, because those who laugh together might just stay together and get some work done. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
welcome.
Next, visiting delegation, we have representatives from Menlo Park and Mill Park.
Great. Yeah, come on up.
I think I'm going to ask Derek if you remember we had an opportunity. It's been a while now, but I'll remind the board about a big check. So
Yep.
I'll just leave it at that and let Derek kind of tee it up and kind of go for it on the update.
And I still have that $1.13 million check in my office. So if you want to drop by and look at it, feel free to do that. Yeah, Luan tried to get me to wear it, but I won't do that. So I'm really excited tonight to be able to have Menlo Park and Mill Park talk about the great work that they've done over the last year. So back in last July, the Mount Hood Julie from the Mount Hood Regulatory Commission presented David Douglas with a $1.13 million check for a 3-year grant at Mill Park and Menlo Park to focus on math and really in grades 3 through 5, ESL and SPED, and really close that achievement gap through the use of technology. And what we've learned through that is buying technologies, just like buying pencils or paper, without a coach and somebody in the classrooms helping, the technology just sits and it isn't effective. And so there's the check. There's a check that's in my office, 1.13. I like to say that number. It's big. But it is our second partnership with the Mount Hood Regulatory Commission. Earl Boyles was our first. And then we had a year off, and then we applied for the second round of funding and was granted that. So I'm not going to take too much thunder from Luan and team, so I'll turn it over.
First, I'd like to thank the board for your support in this because without it, we wouldn't have even gotten this opportunity. The cabinet for your vision, especially Derek with your vision of technology integration at our schools, and the teachers for their hard work, their care, everything they do for their students, and Principals Stell and Burkhart. It is so evident when I came to those schools that they have established a strong culture of staff learning and development. Because if we didn't have that, if staff didn't feel comfortable taking risks or learning, this would not be a success. So thank you guys for doing that. So with the grant, we kind of had to get a kind of a continuum of how we're integrating technology. Like Derek said, we're not going to put all this technology in front of teachers and just say, okay, go do it. So we brought in the SAMR model, and with the substitutions, it goes surface to deep level integration. So for example, with a writing assignment, the substitution would be just like, okay, instead of writing your essay, you're going to type it. With augmentation, you're adding more things like spell check and modification. You're even going deeper, having students share the essay with each other and doing some peer editing. And with redefinition, you're just even taking it a step further and deeper as they're sharing it with someone else, like a pen pal class, or doing some things you'd never even thought possible with technology. So that's our, so this year, I 100% feel that we've reached our goal is to, for teachers to use technology and integrate it on a surface level. So this year, my goal was for them to get comfortable with their technology, know how to use it, learn the ins and outs, and when they're more comfortable and know the technology better and on a deeper level, then they'll be able to innovate and think of other ideas and where to integrate the technology. At the beginning of the year, we did technology agreements at Mill and Menlo Park. So basically what we did was we wanted to get all the staff on the same wavelength. So like one teacher wouldn't think that, oh yeah, YouTube's okay all the time, or they can go on the screens and play games. So we wanted to get everyone on the same page, like what's okay in this class and the other class, and we wanted to be on the same page. And with that, we use this program called Flipgrid. And what Flipgrid does is it lets a teacher assign basically an assignment, and the students respond via video. So they're recording on their Chromebooks a video. And I wanted to show what some of the teachers did, because I did this for the teachers, and some of the responses were pretty cool.
Just real quick, as Lawan sets that up, the technology that was purchased was, excuse me, so that means that every student in grades 3 through 5, ESL and SPED, received a Chromebook and a cart. So one-to-one. They also received amplification systems, so they wear a little lanyard around them, and it's like this, so the teacher doesn't have to talk too loud, and kids, wherever they are in the classroom, can hear. Just like you can hear me, I'm just talking at a normal voice. As well as an interactive, what we call a smart board, but it's really an interactive whiteboard where the kids can go up and like at the younger ages, actually do manipulation of different things. And then they got doc cams as well.
And the smart boards are totally legit. So they are 65-inch 4K TVs that kids can come up and touch and move things. And 4 kids can be up there at the same time, moving different things and drawing different colors. It's really awesome. So if you guys have a chance, definitely come by the school and watch it now.
They're more upgraded smart boards, I take it, than the original.
Yeah, that's all we're making these days, no more projectors. So with this, with the technology agreement, I posted this Flipgrid to the teachers, and I asked them, how do you use technology in your class, and how do you think technology should be used in the class? So how do they think they use it? And secondly, so to get on the same page, how they think it should. So I compiled all those and made a document. Added suggested sentence frames for the language part of it for the staff, and I'll bring up Steve Mosier. Since he's retiring, he won't care anymore that I'm showing him at the board meeting. The kids, when they're done recording, what the teacher asked them to do, they get to take a selfie and then add stickers to it. What they want, they love that part. And then from here, what's cool is that they can also grade the students' performance and stuff too. So I didn't think he performed that well, but his ideas were great.
My newcomer kind of left out our microphone. Beautiful big screen in the background that they've given to me exclusively. I love it. Thank you.
So all the teachers at the staff meeting were speaking on their computers, and from that, what I did was I created agreement. So here it is. So first on, they to engage our students in rich, meaningful, and engaging lessons using visuals, videos, and interactive tools to help students become more proficient in their academic skills by practicing on digital sites, to enable students to more collaborate and communicate with each other and their teacher, to help students share what they've learned or what they already know, to differentiate lessons and learning to fit each and every student's individual needs, and especially, this is the important one, intentionally, meaning that there is a purpose and or function for every use of technology. So we're not just putting technology in front of the kids and say, do whatever. It will not consistently be used to pacify students as busy work with no function or for entertainment. To provide data to drive instruction and to supplement or enhance curriculum and instruction and not to supplant, and to cultivate future-ready skills that students can use for the rest of their lives. So this was presented back to the staff after I come to do with our technology. So it was great to get everyone on the same page, and people being in silos and doing whatever.
And part of that agreement is Lawan being in classrooms and being very purposeful with how he is coaching and modeling the technology. And I think you're going to see that a little bit later. But that is key to a successful program like this.
So to measure data, because we like to do that too with this grant, I gave a survey at the beginning of the year. So there were many questions, and two of them I focused on were teacher skill at integrating technology and teacher of the year. So we had a lot of people feel like they did not know technology at all and really struggled, and they didn't know what to do or had trouble. So at the end of the year, so I gave this, I believe, last week, and that's where the teachers are now for their perception. So you have one person that's on the 5 midway of being an expert, and then many at 7 and 8 and even at 6. So the teachers are feeling so much more skillful and adept at using technology, and that really helps, especially with the innovation piece and discovering new and additional ways to teach lessons. Here it is with comfort. If you're not comfortable using technology or anything else, it's hard to learn. So this is where the teachers were at the beginning of the year. Some people were really comfortable, others not. So that's the great thing about working with so many teachers at different on the continuum. And here it is at the end of the year. So we have 4 people that can basically use technology in their sleep, and others that are close. Or believe they can, yeah. Some highlights of what we've done. So in this is Miss Gurney at Menlo Park. With the smart board, she was able to Skype a scientist in Antarctica in real time. So they were studying, I believe they were studying climate or something, but she had a neighbor, knew someone that worked there, and I believe he's an educator too. So he called in. It was a good 20 to 30 minutes, and he was telling the students about what he does and how the life was like in Antarctica. And the kids, in turn, at the end, got to ask questions of what life was like. It was pretty amazing. It's something you can't do without technology, obviously. Here, Mr. Mosier again. This was him using the smartboard with his newcomer group. And with the smartboard, for some reason, the kids are so drawn to screens and big TVs. No matter, if they displayed the same thing on a projector like this, it's fine. But on a smartboard, they're glued. So the engagement is so much higher with a smartboard. But with a smart notebook, there's pre-made lessons that he can download and building context to what he's trying to teach the kids. And whenever he presses one of those, it'll say the word, what it is to the kids, and they can come up there and press it and practice saying it too. So every Friday, there's a class that does Hour of Code. So I'm really pushing coding for the students, and that this teacher has dedicated and do many hands-on activities using technology. That's called an auto to it, so it recognizes all those shapes, and it's doing tangram, so it gives the students this object that they want them to build with all those little shapes, and it knows like when the kid's done it right, and yeah, it's pretty cool. And here, our language teacher at Mill, she works with this kid. He just came not too long ago, and there are apps on her iPad that we also got with the grant. So these big ones here. And she has apps that helps the kid. It comes with a pencil, so they're writing. And again, it's leadership. Though this is where I invite the principals to come up. This is Bob using a smart board during one of our staff meetings.
It was awesome to be in that training. I want to say thanks. When I first became principal, the proud principal of Mill Park, I asked Derek, what do I need to do to get technology into Mill Park? And it's happening. So thank you for that. But with Flipgrid, it's pretty fun. Maybe one time Luan could lead you through something. The things we try to do is teach language throughout the day, especially with our newcomers. But kids can't opt out, and it is really cool. So they want to record themselves about a math problem or using a sentence frame, and then they turn it into their teacher online. And so then if they're a little shy speaking, you could hear then the staff meeting with Mr. Mosier, they can speak into their Chromebook, they can record who's really watching it, but then the teacher can go back individually and watch that. So I think just with student engagement, it's been amazing. Some of you have been in, and you've noticed them. They're big TVs that are pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of talk a little bit about the teacher growth. Luan has shared the data, but as I go into the classrooms, that's one of the things that I really am paying attention to. How are teachers using the technology, and where are they on that model? Are they just the beginning stages, and how are they developing? But one of the things that's been really great is having Luan be the coach, because he's very involved in classrooms, and he'll go in and model a lesson for the teachers, but really help a teacher be very comfortable in whatever technology, whether it's the Flipgrid or the Smartboard. And they just have dove in, and a lot of times the kids are the experts, and it allows the kids to shine through. They'll be like, okay, so-and-so, you're the technology coach this week, and the kids will come up and coach the teacher through their problems. One of the things with equity and voice was the Red Cats. Not only can all the kids hear the teachers, but we can also hear the kids. They're able to pass that microphone around. And so those children that maybe are a little more reluctant to speak can just speak in their normal voice, not have to feel on the spot. They can be heard throughout the classroom. And I think that's been an amazing tool. And then with our Imagine Learning, many of you probably already know, but it comes in many different languages, and it teaches language and literacy skills. So the students are able, if they're not very proficient in English yet, they're able to listen in their first language, and then it kind of will modify as they become more proficient in English. They're able to wean themselves and do more English, but it's such a comfort for those kids that are just here from a new country and don't know, and to hear their own language, and you can see them have a little sense of relief as they're doing that. So as we do our walkthroughs, we're looking for how are teachers using it, how are the kids engaging with one another. I know one of our teachers, I actually think it was your daughter, her teacher did the student where they did their own conferences. They were student led, but they did them through the smart boards, and the kids just really had an opportunity to shine. It was awesome to see them lead their conferences, and the teacher kind of guided them, but they were able to share all of their work through that. And then as far as student engagement of our kids, it's a real game changer. If they haven't been successful due to self-regulation, they're able to be successful. They don't maybe always have the social skills, but when they can see themselves as leaders through technology, it improves their behavior. Other kids see them as leaders, so it really just kind of equalizes the playing field for a lot of kids. And I think that's been really important. We've been able to do some modeling to lots of other schools around the state on our implementation of Imagine Learning, so that's been great as well. And to see the math work that's being done is very exciting. So Luan's doing a great job. We appreciate Derek's support, and we're really thankful to everybody's support to bring that technology to us. Thank you.
So this is a funny story. So with Flipgrid, the first thing I do when I go in lessons, do model lessons with the teachers, using Flipgrid is I ask the students, okay, who wants to be a YouTuber when they grow up? And like they all raise their hand. So this, like with the Flipgrid, it's so natural. Like they love to record themselves and watch themselves again. And the other cool thing that we're going to do more of next year is that through Flipgrid, students can respond to other students as well. So like we can do lessons about like agree or disagree respectfully, and then, yeah, I can't wait.
And I have to say that through this grant, Lawan has developed digital citizenship lessons so that students know how to appropriately, respond to each other and what is appropriate use of technology. Actually, we're going to review that this summer, and he's going to revise some of those plans based off of some updated curriculum. But that's another piece that's key as well, is not only the use of it, but really teaching students how to use it.
Hi, my name's Sarah Kemp. Those are my students. I teach 4th grade at Mill Park Elementary School. So my ability to have access to technology this year has been great for me and my students. It allowed for flexibility while I was teaching, which was kind of hard to attain previously when I'm having to plan things without that type of technology. When I planned my lessons for the week, I just had to share the PDFs to the Smartboard with the Smart Notebook, and then I had access to all substitute as well. My students caught on really quickly to using the Smartboard, and so whenever I was gone, they would show the substitute where the subfolder was, and I had all of the documents in there that I needed for them, and so it was a really easy way for my kids to do what they needed to do and for me to feel good that I knew everything was going to go okay. I could also keep my Google Classroom open on the browser tab at all times, and any other websites that I use daily. It allowed me to project e-readers up onto the board and share them to Google Classroom so my students could read them on their Chromebooks instead of having to print them out and things like that. It streamlined pretty much every aspect of teaching for me that was previously a little bit more time consuming. I was also able to get funding for a website called Vocabulary, and it's really awesome. It teaches reading, math, writing, and any other subject concepts through engaging and age-appropriate rap videos. So the kids really love it, and they kind of get it stuck in their head, so that's the purpose of it, to teach them how, the certain concept. So the students love this website and would ask to watch all the old videos when we revisited the concept. The Smartboard and the Chromebooks also made websites like Kahoot very easy to use. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's an online quiz program, and so I could quickly just project my class dojo, and it would put them all into groups in like a couple of seconds, and then they would see their group, go get their Chromebook, and immediately do either a group, a partner, or an independent quiz that I had ready. And you can either create your own quiz or find one. There's a huge database of all of that. And there's a ton of other engaging websites that I specifically curated for each student, like Raz Kids, which I got from the grant as well, and Freckle Math. And so I was able to also use an iPad Pro with Bluetooth headphones that worked really well for my lower level readers who needed help with their phonics skills. It helped streamline my independent time during reading groups. When students weren't working with me or silent reading, they were either on the iPad Pro with the Bluetooth headphones, or they were reading books at their level through Raz Kids. I could set it exactly to their Lexile level. I had a small speaker system apart from my teacher microphone and speaker, and I played quiet piano music through it while everyone worked. So I could use my speaker to talk to them, and then I could use a different one to play music. So that was really nice. And if I needed the attention of the class, I could just flip on my mic right under me. It was hooked around my neck, and talk in a normal voice, and everybody in the class could hear me. So it made it so my voice didn't get strained every day, and all of my students could hear me no matter where I was in the room. Overall, I feel really lucky to have had access to all of the technology this year, and I think it directly benefited my students and me, and I can't wait to use it next year and have Luan help the next couple of years implement more aspects of it into my classroom. So thank you.
So those speakers that you see up there, so Bose build is, so this has to do with like have to put together. So the kit comes with a speaker apart, and they build it, and in the process of building it, it has lessons about how sound waves work and how the magnet works, and having more air push makes deeper bass. So it's pretty cool. So they not only get to enjoy the awesome speakers, at the end they get to learn about sound. Yeah, it's neat. Next up, Ms. Quick.
Hello, I'm Nancy Quick, and I'm a self-contained special education teacher at Menlo Park. I have first in my classroom, which can be in terms of differentiating for a lot of different ages and grades. My students, I have a lot of students with autism, and many that don't speak, and the technology has been a wonderful way to help reach them and help them output what they know. So we weren't going to click on any of those. Oh, were we going to? Yeah. Oh, okay. We have not, the special education classes don't always get access to a lot of those things. And so thankful that you included the special education classrooms, because our students are just with technology like all the other students. This is one application that we've done a lot of the things the other people have talked about that you've heard, but this was what do we call that? The robot.
Oh, the swivel. So
the swivel.
We were also able to purchase swivels, and what those are basically classroom observation tools, so that teachers either put their iPad or their phone on the swivel, and it follows wherever the necklace goes. So if you're over here, you see the little camera, something like that. It's really cool.
So we have a purchased curriculum in our district that was separate from the technology grant for a special education K through 12, and it's called what's it called? Unique. And in that program, they have a lot of interactive things for the smart boards, but I never had a smart board, so I couldn't use any of that. Now with the smart board, I can, and I do a nonfiction article every day with WH questions, who, what, when, where, why. And I was able to record myself doing one of the lessons and send it to my principal and say, hey, look what we're doing. Which was really neat, because she can't always get in our room, so it's nice for her to be able to see this is me just playing with it. But the nice thing is to be able to access those lessons I've never been able to use with my kids with the technology or the curriculum that we had. So don't play all of it, but just a little.
Let's find out.
I'm making sure it was okay.
Thank you. We have our story today. Are you ready? Our story's title today is, can you read it with me? Halloween Decorations. That's a very big title. Halloween decorations. We've been talking about Halloween, and let's find out about Halloween decorations. First, we're going to listen. Let's review our expectations. So we are sitting, kind of voice.
Halloween decorations may include music. The decorations may include things that seem real but are just pretend. These things include bats, spiders, ghosts, witches, skeletons, and tombstones. Halloween decorations around there may...
Thank you for listening. We'll come around and give you some points for nice. You were listening quietly, eyes looking at screen. Let's look at that story a little more closely, shall we? Yes, we shall. All right, Halloween decorations.
You can pause it.
Can you help me? People decorate.
So this, especially for autism, need help with comprehension of receptive language. And so the words are up there, and they've got pictures that go with every word. And everything can be touched on, that can be read, and sounds. The kids come up that way too. And they can also have a copy of it right there on their desk and interact with it. So that's just an example. That's enough.
There. You say Halloween. Food, bats, spiders, ghosts, witches, and skeletons. The decorations can include scary music or noises too. Have you seen? Pretend. Seem very scary, but they are too scary. Here's our 3 questions. What? Our next WH question, 8.
When does the student come up?
Near the end there.
Oh, that's going to Halloween, Valentine's Day, or Thanksgiving.
Halloween.
Nice job. Let's all be a cheerleader for Brad. Yay, everyone!
Okay, that's good. So there you saw that students more engaged. They're much more willing to take risks and write and read and do things because of the technology. So that's great. And then the Flipgrid, the way that I use it, this is an example of a student who is pretty severely impacted with his autism, and last year he did not speak. Ways of communicating pictures and that sort of thing. This year we've gotten him to speak more, and we're using the technology to help him with his reading, because I was getting him to try to read out loud and to read related that had no connection. And so he's using Flipgrid to read and then listen to himself and reflect and learn about how, oh, is that really how we read? Do we say the dog in the box or whatever? He's learning to read like at a regular spoken rate. So I was able to share this with his parents at his IEP meeting, and they were thrilled. They had never heard him read like this before, and they were so excited. And they said, "What is this program? We want this at home." So there's a lot of good.
Sounds off on
your turn. I missed a few words there. Let's take our time. It is Pete. Pete is ready a sandwich would be nice. A sandwich would be nice. Pete opens the fridge.
Anyway, there's more to that. But he loves taking the selfies at the end. Amazing that we can use this and have this, and the special ed students are using it. The picture there, our students are all typing their work. We do a typing program called Type, and they practice the typing like the old school typewriter, work that we used to do in high school, or I did anyway. But they're all typing, and then they type all their written work. And next year, I'm hoping Lauren's going to coach me and teach me how to send all this out to their parents, so we can share all the work that they're doing with their parents. So, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Deeper integration, so less of the substitution and more into the modification. Basically, some of the teachers are doing that right now, so it depends on what continuum they're on that SAMR model, but we want to, again, go deeper. Instead of just having the kids type their assignments, what else can we do? How can they peer edit with themselves or with the teacher or maybe with another class? So that's some of the things, and more innovation. So as we get more into the grant, teachers will create lessons, and I learned so much from the teacher of coding emphasis. So a huge push that I'm doing with the teachers this year is putting out the hour of code and having them have their students code. As you guys know, is such an important skill. And I use this website called code.org, and they have Mark Zuckerberg, the creator of Twitter, the creator of Steam. They all talk about how important coding is. They have Chris Bosh, the basketball player, too. And the kids just sit there and code. They learn how to code, and it's such an important skill because the kids have to critically think what's going on. They have to plan, and more importantly, what I tell the kids is, we are so excited that you guys are going to mess up. And when you mess up, what do you do after that? You learn. So there's a lot of times with the code where it doesn't go right, and that's okay. It's how they respond to it, fix their mistakes, and make it work. Just the feeling that they have after they've messed up on a code, something didn't work, and then they finally get it. It's outstanding. Something else that we're wanting to focus on is applied math. So with LearnZillion, there's a lot of context that it oftentimes misses. So when you learn something, having context really helps them learn. So with this augmented reality sandbox, we want to build more context what the kids learn, like for instance, like elevation or average fractions, and you can do it all with the sandbox. I want to show what it looks like. So our plan is to build them this summer with collaboration with Greg Keller with his woodshop class. So he's going to build the box, and we purchased the technology. And it's great because it's not just us, but it's with Greg too.
So we were able to get high school kids to help actually build the apparatus, the hardware piece of this.
At UC Davis. We're going to be using it here at UCLA. Topographic map in the classroom. Try to recreate the features by manipulating the sand. I can, take one mound, make it into two mounds. I can make it rain over the top of this, and I can see how the water flows down the sides of the hills. Push that material up in here. That water wants to go somewhere else, and now it's going to float it through this channel into our reservoir flow. So when the students are on the field, they don't have a sandbox to recreate what they have on the map. They can recreate it in their head. They can build a mental model and identify where they're at, identify certain features in the area.
I am so looking forward to what for not only math, but with science and just everything else. Like, imagine learning the water cycle on something like that. It's going to be fantastic. And that's it. Thank you.
So I just do want to say one thing, that it's not just David Douglas, but the Mount Hood Regulatory also provides grants with Portland Public, Gresham, who else are you with? Centennial, Reynolds, and so they actually meet as a cadre of coaches and visit each other's schools and classrooms, so we can see what the other districts are doing. They can learn from us, we can learn from them, and so it really is a powerful model, a county-wide model. So in closing, I just want to say thank you to the leadership of Bob and Kelly. It wouldn't be possible. It really has to be an all-in thing. So not just providing it, but not just providing the grant, but everybody from the building leaders all the way down to the teachers all in. And I urge you to take an opportunity to come and see this, to see them. Lawan and I meet at least once a week and kind of debrief. I don't get to get into the classrooms as much as I'd like to, but every time I get in there, I'm amazed at what the kids are doing. So,
Okay, is there any questions, board members?
Who taught my son to take a Google document and make it Arabic? No, I just have to say I have twins in third grade at Menlo, and they both were so engaged with this technology this year. It was amazing to see my daughter's conference and her standing up and running her own conference on the smartboard and saying, well, Mom, my fluency level is at 98%. I'm almost there, and I can read 100 words per minute now, but by the end of the year, I'm supposed to be here, so I'm on track. And she just ran her own conference. And this morning, my son, through his teacher, had sent me a PowerPoint with some of his thoughts about school. And it's just, he has been a child who has a lot of problems around regulating himself. And I've just noticed a tremendous growth this year. And like I said, he will see a Google document open and find some way to try to trick me. And suddenly it's in Arabic or some other language.
Yeah,
But thank you for all you've done,
Oh, it's
all of you on the technology. I wish everybody in every school had that opportunity. It's been incredible. So thanks.
Yeah, there's much more that the teachers have been doing that we'd love to share, but we don't have time. But it's truly remarkable what they've done and what they're capable of doing too.
Okay, Donna, you had a question?
A lot of questions. I'm going to go real fast though. How long has this been in use in these particular schools?
So this is year one for Mill and Menlo. 4 years ago, we got the same grant at Earl Boyles, and that was a 3-year grant, and it provided the same amount of technology, except that grant was reading based, and that was pre-K3, and this grant is math centered and 3rd through 5th. But ERC is part of the grant, special ed, and ELL, that's part of the grant too.
And so with this, when or how long before you would expect to see impact that could be measured? And an impact in it could be any variety of ways. It could be improved attendance, because you talked about the engagement piece and how much more kids are enjoying learning again. So in attendance, or a decrease in discipline issues, or improved comprehension in the case where it's reading, or improved applications, and then of course eventually improved test scores and things like that. How long do you think before you come back and say, this is what, where we are now? And is there already, the way to measure those things?
Yes. So with the grant, they partner with Pacific Research Evaluation, and they interview the teachers. They use all the data that I sent them from the staff surveys, and from what they found, and they get data from Derek too. And what they found was increased scores through those 3 grades in Earl Boyles from the grant. And I have that full report if you'd like to see it someday. It's pretty long, but it shows all the data and what they've measured and everything. Derek, do you know?
Yeah, so that's one of the great things with this grant is that Mount Hood Regulatory, through what they call the TechSmart grant, didn't just give dollars and say, okay, here's a coach, go forth and do good things and report back to us whatever you want. There are specific metrics that they ask us, and quarterly we have to do a report that's asking, how are you making, basically some of the same questions, sure, how are you making sure that your teachers are progressing like you want them to? How do you know that your students are progressing like you want them to? And the one, like I said, at the end they do a big report, and we have that for Earl Boyles. So
great. Have you noticed any disparities in terms of skill level or comfort, like you mentioned, for the teachers among the students based on different student groups, whether that's gender or ethnicity or grade level? Have you seen any, like, boys do really well with this, but the girls are not as interested, or like any of those things at this point?
With the kids, they are so comfortable with technology. That's what they live. That's the world they live in. With the coding, I do, for some reason, see more boys gravitating to that. However, when we do coding, everyone's involved. And in that video that we show them at the beginning, it's very diverse. There's, men, women, people of different races, color. It's all across the board. So we want to get the point that everyone can code. Anyone can code, not just boys, or not just people who are smart or whatever, but every single person.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then my last questions are there any ways for students to access the system from home?
Yes. So through the David Douglas website, under the For Students, they can log on to their Gmail account, and from there they can access their Google Classroom, their Google Drive with all their assignments, and they can do that from home too.
And
also can access their Imagine Learning in different programs.
Yeah. And
over the summer and in the evening, as long as they have access to internet. We've been trying to promote the $9.99 Comcast internet. I know I've been telling parents about it and putting it in our parent information thing to send home a flyer for every child on how to access Imagine Learning over the summer.
Has there ever been thought to having a night where parents are invited and you do a presentation like this for parents?
I did that for Earl Boyles. I showed the parents, I believe it was during curriculum night, where I showed them what we were doing. And then the teachers also did a tremendous job of showing what they were doing in class during conferences as well.
That's great. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And one thing, actually the other thing that we're also pushing to parents, this might be for next year, is digital citizenship. The site Common Sense Media has many resources about that, not only for teachers and students, but they have technology, digital citizenship lessons for parents as well. So I encourage you to check it out if you have kids.
So we purposefully didn't have a parent night the very first year. We didn't want to put teachers on the spot where they may not be comfortable with the technology. So if I'm remembering right, at Earl Boyles, we actually did it the second and third year, I believe, to give teachers a chance to get familiar with it, to be able to have experience with it. And but that's definitely something that we will hopefully do again.
Okay. Any other questions? Want to thank you, and I'm assuming with the coding, they're learning logic at least.
Definitely.
When I did coding way back when, you learn a lot of logic.
It's still exactly the same thing, but now it's with Angry Birds or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really
Well, thank you very much. Ken, you want
Just an echo thank you. Derek already said it. I think Board Meeting Stevens, Frida, you said it. Just thank you for being here tonight. I know it's a little late, but appreciate you guys coming, sharing, and more importantly, what you're doing in the classrooms for our teachers and the leadership in the buildings. Really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess we're going to get on with proclamations, and I'm going to turn the first one over to you, Andrea. Let me skip this. I need to dig mine out.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next item that we have is our LGBTQ plus Pride Month proclamation. And I'm particularly excited about this one, as I have been throughout the year with our other proclamations, but for a slightly different reason. Not only has this series been really incredible for our district to really have the first type of proclamation in our district for Pride Month and all of the other culturally specific months. But as far as I'm aware of in the research that I've done, this is the first LGBTQ plus Pride Month proclamation that any school district in the area has done in recent years, if not ever. I was only able to go back, for the past 4 or 5 years, so there could have been one before that, although I doubt it. And so I'm particularly excited about the leadership, about the collaboration on this proclamation that our district put together to really, again, be a leader in highlighting not only the need for a proclamation like this, but the reason behind it and the goal. And so, similar to the other runs of shows, there are a few data points and kind of stats that I just want to briefly highlight from the proclamation. And, the reasoning all along in really being intentional about highlighting some of the areas in the proclamations is to demonstrate the work that the David Douglas School District is doing with our culturally specific communities, and also to, kind of put the marker in the ground of where we are, where we're starting from, and where we want to go in the future. And then I'm going to turn it over to Madeline, who's here with a student, I believe, who is going to be willing to share some remarks, and then we'll close it out with our board chair to read the proclamation. So just a couple of the brief points that I wanted to highlight in the proclamation specific to our district. I wanted to mention some of the things that were striking to me were that 2% of the David Douglas High School and middle school students reported they identify outside of the gender binary. And I mentioned this, 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but I also want to remind folks that David Douglas has the largest high school in the state. And so when we look at, how many students this is, I think this is, a great point of data collection to start with, and a really good reminder that these are our students. These are folks who historically have been forced to keep their identities hidden and have had violence targeted towards them because of that identity. And so this is, I think, a particularly exciting proclamation to be able to start outlining some of that here in our district. And then there was one other point, and to kind of reflect that And then I'll turn it over to Madeline. We also had a data point around 60% of LGBTQ students in a national study felt unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation, and 45% because of their gender expression. And as we really look at, youth taking leadership across the country in, talking about the need for safety in schools, not only related to gun safety, but just feeling comfortable in the classroom. These are really striking data points, and I'm really excited about the youth leadership that we have here. The different student groups who are working. Not only our student group specifically comprised of students identifying within the LGBTQ community, but certainly other students and other culturally specific student groups. And so I'm really excited about, having the opportunity to start the conversation at the board level and then continue to see how students are continuing to be engaged in this conversation. So that being said, I'll go ahead and invite both Madeline and our guest here up to share a little bit more about their process. And one other thing that I'll add is that slightly different strategy, I guess, that we had this time around is that Madeline actually played a really significant role in writing the proclamation, I would say, in almost in entirety. And so I really appreciated all of your work. I understand how long that takes, having written all the other ones, and all the research that you put in really made it very strong. And so I really appreciate you doing that. So thank you.
So I'm going to start by sharing a testimony that was shared with me from a member of our school district community. She is a teacher at one of the schools, and she asked to stay anonymous because she doesn't feel safe coming out of the closet to the entire district, which I think is an important part to start with. All right, so this is not my story. This belongs to someone else. My experience in the David Douglas School District began in 1986 as a kindergartner at Mill Park. I moved on and finished my primary years at Cherry Park, middle school at Alice Ott, and eventually graduated from high school in 1999. In 2004, I completed my student teaching and was hired at David Douglas School District, where I have worked for 15 years. In total, including my student teaching experience, I have spent 29 years in this hamlet. One of the major shifts I've seen is the district's move to actively cultivate equity and inclusivity. Thus, when I received an email about a Pride proclamation the school board was drafting, I was happy to see that the work is still continuing because there is a lot of growing to do, and it is important work. To demonstrate why this Pride proclamation matters, I've included a personal timeline of my LGBTQ experience in the district. And I'm just going to share a few highlights from this. So in 1999, 20 years ago, not one student or staff was out that I knew of. In 2004, 15 years ago, a coworker reminded me that I could be fired without cause and to be careful about my gayness. 15 years ago, several administrators said starting a GSA was career suicide, and GSA is a Gay Straight Alliance. In 2006, 13 years ago, after a training I provided about sexual and gender minorities, a coworker said, if a boy wears a skirt to school, he deserves what he gets. In 2009, 10 years ago, the Fur Ridge GSA partnered with the David Douglas High School to march in the Pride Parade. We were told we couldn't identify ourselves with the district. Through parent, student, and staff activism, the district reevaluated its stance and allowed us to proudly identify ourselves as members of the David Douglas School District. 2016, 3 years ago, while running a social justice fundraiser, I received an email from a district staff member condemning the LGBTQ buttons as inappropriate for the district. In 2017, 2 years ago, a healthy relationship curriculum, legislatively mandated, was pushed out in the district, which showed only straight couples. It has been updated. This proclamation is the next evolution, and I thank you for your efforts because it matters. I'll be proud to add 2019 School Board honors LGBTQ community with a Pride proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Justin Murphy. I am a recently graduated student of David Douglas High School, and 13 years ago, you probably wouldn't even have heard the word gay as anything other than an insult in these schools. I have heard it used against myself many times, and never once did I speak out, as I was terrified, because these were the kids who were older than me, bigger than me, and they were so easily able to take me out, as it were. And now I'm suddenly hearing that the school board has decided to make a proclamation, and that's one of the biggest things for me as a transgender, biromantic, and demisexual student who has who has been at this school district. I started out at Earl Boyles, and there was where I heard most of the insults of gay or other words which I'm not going to say because they upset me greatly. And then when I got to middle school, I went to a different one from my peers. And suddenly I was at a school that was a lot more welcoming. But still, it took until my junior year to even hear much about other things besides like gay or lesbian. I didn't even know what the word trans was until then, because they don't really teach it in the school district. I didn't even think it would be possible. I thought I would still be identifying as a girl this day, but here we are. And another thing that shocks me is that I still sometimes hear you were at the graduation where the student speaker said that we were a very tolerant, diverse group, yet those words were coming from kids who had said insults not even 6 years prior. It amazes me how quickly we change and how quickly we are able to share, suddenly feel like we're able to, oh God.
Take your time.
To see that we're a lot more different than we originally thought. In elementary school, you don't really hear about this stuff, and it saddens me because the kids need to know these things, that it's okay to have this kind of thing, because a lot of families, they don't even think it's okay. So if students are taught this stuff, maybe that we'll be able to have a more tolerant community in general. And I thank you for this opportunity so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say, as someone who's been around this district for 40 years, I've seen the evolution, especially in the last few years. As you mentioned, in elementary school, you wouldn't hear about it. My granddaughter has a friend at her elementary school that she talked to me about it as if it was no big deal, that this child was a girl last year, but she came back as a boy this year. And the kids were just accepting of it. That's just the way it is. So I think it's taken the younger generation to teach the older generation how to be more accepting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually noticed that with a lot of parents, how at first they'll be like, please explain this again for the 15th time. But then a kid can come to school one day and be like, I want to be called a different name. And every other kid is just like, okay. It's very interesting to see how gradually these parents, they're realizing, oh, my kid is okay with this. It's fine, right? And it's amazing to see what the younger generation, what our generation has done.
Yes, it definitely is, because I can remember when everyone had to be in the closet or they wouldn't be hired. So we have changed. But thank you for coming and talking today. I know how it can be real scary. Okay, ready to read the proclamation? I keep telling Andrea she needs to make them shorter. The David Douglas School District Proclamation proclaiming the month-long celebration of the LGBTQ plus Pride Month in June. Whereas Gay and Lesbian Pride Month was first declared by President Clinton in 1999, and in 2009, President Obama issued a proclamation reclaiming it Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. And whereas Pride Month celebrations, including people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, two-spirit, pansexual, asexual, gender fluid, non-binary, intersex, as well as heterosexual and cisgender allies. And whereas many groups are commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, which inspired the concept of Pride Month. And whereas Portland and Oregon more widely has long been a home to LGBTQ political leaders, including former Mayor Sam Adams, the first only gay mayor of a major U.S. city, current Governor Kate Brown, the first LGBT person elected governor in the United States, and former mayor of Silverton, Stu Rasmussen, the first only trans mayor in the U.S. And whereas in addition to government officials, Portland also has a rich history of LGBTQ community leaders, including activists and founder of Portland's first Pride March, Kathleen Sadat, judge and Asian Pacific Islander Pride co-founder Lynn Nakamoto, founding board member of Portland's Q Center and PDX Latinx Pride David Martinez, and founder of the Portland Two-Spirit Society Amanda Brings Plenty, that's her whole name, Amanda Brings Plenty Right, among countless others. And whereas we must acknowledge that the LGBTQ community has faced and continues to face systemic discrimination, including restricted rights, social stigma, challenges accessing health care and other basic social services, and startling rates of violence. And whereas it is still legal in 28 states to fire workers for being gay, which impacts the ability of our educators to come out and be visibly queer on campus, also limiting the number and visibility of positive role models for youth. And whereas in a national study done in 2017, 60% of LGBTQ students felt unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation, 45% because of their gender expression, and 35% because of their gender. And whereas across the country, 77% of the LGBTQ youth report feeling down or depressed, 30% of the LGBTQ have faced physical threats, and LGBT youth are almost 5 times more likely to have attempted suicide compared to heterosexuals. And whereas 2% of the DDSD high school and middle school students reported that they identify outside of the gender binary, and there are an estimated 150,000 transgender youth nationwide between the ages of 13 and 17. However, more than half of all trans and gender expansive youth reported they had no access to a school restroom that matched their gender identity, and only 1 in 3 were always called their true name while at school. And whereas, according to recent DDSD survey, nearly 1/3 of middle school students, 29%, and 1/5, 20% of high school students do not identify as straight. Despite the size of these groups, lesbian, gay, and bisexual students at DDSD high schools and middle schools were twice as likely to report having been bullied in the past year, and gay and lesbian high school students in particular reported twice as much physical bullying as other students. And whereas students at the DDSD middle and high schools who identify outside of the gender binary were more likely to report being bullied and harassed than cisgender students, with 71% of non-binary middle school students reporting bullying compared to 41% of cisgender students. And whereas a national school climate survey in 2017 reported that the majority of the LGBTQ students of color across racial and ethnic groups experienced bullying and harassment due to their sexual orientation and gender expression, while also experiencing high rates of anti-LGBTQ school policies. These kinds of compounding and intersectional inequalities are often overlooked. And whereas schools in our district run groups that support the social and emotional needs of our LGBTQ students, including pride clubs at our high school and middle schools. These clubs work to promote LGBTQ inclusion in schools, such as gender-neutral bathrooms. In addition, students at DDHS have worked to promote LGBTQ inclusivity in their school by including specific events during Multicultural Week. And whereas in order to recognize and support the unique challenges of LGBTQ students, the district is working to bring more inclusive language, spread awareness of different sexual and gender identities, and doing more to show that we are proud of our community. And whereas the DDSD non-discriminatory policy explicitly forbids discrimination or harassment based on sex or sexual orientation. And whereas DDSD teaches gender and sexual identity as part of its standard health curriculum at all grade levels, including tools to respect and understand different identities and orientations, but we recognize there is more work to be done. And whereas we recognize that given the hardships and disparities faced by the LGBTQ community, this proclamation is only a small step of many that we need to take to be truly inclusive and supportive of our LGBTQ students and their families. And now, therefore, I, Frida Christopher, Chair of the David Douglas School Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim June 1st through June 30th, 2019 to be LGBTQ plus Pride Month at the David Douglas School District. Be it further resolved that David Douglas School Board of Directors strongly encourage our staff and community to observe, recognize, and celebrate the contributions of LGBTQ plus people in our country, our state, our cities, and our schools. Thank you. Did you want closing comments?
I don't have any right now.
Okay.
Before you leave, I know you got to get out of here. I just want to thank Madeline again. I know Andrea, but I really want to recognize and say thank you to our student. Just a few words come to mind when you sat here and testified. One's courage, dedication, passion, leadership, all of those. So it takes a lot to come up here and communicate with us your truth. And I just heartfelt want to say thank you and continue to be a leader in the community because it's appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We happen to have two proclamations this month. The other is really a proclamation for September, but Bryce Anderson, one of our board member, who is leaving our board after this month, had asked that this is very personal to him and something he strongly believes in, and he wanted to do this himself instead of us waiting until September to do so. So it has to do with Constitution Week, and given how I personally feel how our Constitution is currently being under attack right now, that it's important that we recognize the key components and tenets of it, and remember some of the items that made our country the way it originally was. I believe it's a evolving document, and just as we heard today on the other proclamation, the changing, this is a document that probably needs a little more changing, but it may take the next generation to do it. But it's just something we have to think about, is that our country is evolving, people involved, and what wasn't accepted even 10 years ago is accepted today. So anyway, I'm going to turn the proclamation over to you, Bryce, give you the honors.
Thank you, Frida. The David Douglas School District proclamation recognizing Constitution Week, September 17th through the 23rd, 2019, and Constitution Day, Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. The Constitution of the United States was adopted on September 17th, 1787 by the delegates to the Constitutional Convention. The United States Constitution is known as the supreme law of the land and deserves our respect and awareness of the many privileges and responsibilities afforded to those who live under the jurisdiction thereof. Whereas the David Douglas School District is a duly authorized and accredited K-12 educational institution charged with the responsibility of educating the children within the district community. Specifically, a fundamental part of education is civic instruction, adapted to the capability of each grade level, and whereas a fundamental understanding of the United States Constitution with the privileges and responsibilities of its citizens and those seeking citizenship is vital to an informed citizenry, productive economy, and maintaining freedom and liberty for all persons, and whereas September 17th, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week, and whereas assemblies, classroom discussion, research, and reports are fitting and proper ways to accord official recognition to this important document and its memorable anniversary. Now, therefore, we the members of the Board of Directors of the David Douglas School District do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week, and September 17th as Constitution Day. And in witness thereof, I have signed this proclamation. If I was Frida, I'd be reading this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna have a late meeting. I told you not to say it was gonna be a short meeting. Right now, we're gonna take a recess our meeting for a public hearing adopting in regard to the 2019-20 budget. Close the public hearing on the budget, and I'm going to reopen the school board meeting. The next agenda item is the resolution adopting budget, making appropriations, and levying taxes for the fiscal year 2019-2020. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess you're ready to go for July 1st. Okay, and we're finally going on to superintendent's report.
Yes, and very short. It's that time of year. Everything's going on. I just have 3 things to recognize. The very first one is recognizing all of our staff and leadership. Just a quick heads up on numbers for you. We have over 80 FTE, 80 positions that we've posted so far this spring, and we filled about 53 of those. You can think about the work and energy and time as we're ending a year and still focusing on our students. That's just a lot of extra, and I want to thank everyone that's involved, including our HR department, and just give our board a heads up about that. That is not new FTE. That's with individuals leaving through retirement, resignations, right? So actually our FTEs reduced. We reduced FTE this year, but just a heads up there. The second thing, most of you were there, so it's easy for me to say, but both the high school graduation and the Third Ridge graduation, were very exciting, and I'm just proud to report that we have to date, where is it at? 669 students who've received some sort of graduation credential as we speak. So just very excited about that. I have the breakdowns. I'll send it in an email from our different elementary schools and our middle schools who went through our system and graduated. But both of those are beautiful ceremonies and exciting for those students, young adults. And then finally, lastly, just a recognition of our staff. This board meeting comes the night before the last day of school. We have a half day of school tomorrow. So for another great year for all the work they do, just so appreciative. And I know they finished strong this week, even through some heat that get a little over the top at times with some of our classrooms that's southern facing, but they did it. And staff come back next Monday for the final day, and we're already planning for next year. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Superintendent? Okay, let's, next item is our consent agenda. Does anyone wish to have anything removed? These for newer people, these are a lot of housekeeping we do at the end of the year regarding many of these resolutions. So do I have a motion to, if nothing to be withdrawn, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do I have a second?
So, yeah, second.
It's moved in And seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move on to radon update, and I'm assuming Pat is taking that one.
So in your packet was a memo giving you a summary of locations where we went from short-term testing to long-term testing. So if you recall, what we do is first go through a short-term test. Then if it's determined to be above 4 picoliters, it goes through a long-term test. And usually in between that time, we try to tweak the HVAC components of the building to see if that helps. In many cases, it does. We find things that have quit running or aren't running as well as they should be, or maybe even just need to be cleaned. So, or find things that are covered up, because sometimes we pack things in as quick as compactly as we can and forget that buildings do need to breathe just like we do. So you'll notice there's still some high areas in the list that is provided, and we are currently working with a company on different mitigation options for the ones that are still above 4, and seeing what we can do to get that decreased. Again, any of these results are online, so you can look online also to find them.
Okay, is there any questions on the radon report? Looks like we're into a lot of different testing now that they started lead testing and everything. Okay, the next is discussion on board meeting procedures, and I'm going to turn this over to Andrea. She would like to introduce some potential changes to how we will be moving forward and handling board meetings. This is something is left up to us as a board. You know, as long as we follow the proper legal laws, some of the procedures we can choose how we would like to handle. So I'll turn it over to you.
Collectively.
Yeah, collectively.
Yes, so in your packets, you have a memo essentially outlining some of the procedures and proposed policy changes. And excuse me, it wasn't actually in the packet. Lori printed it out, so it should have been on in front of you all in your areas. I won't necessarily read through it all, but I do first and foremost want to give high praise to Lori, who really helped wrangle not only myself and Frida through various versions of this, but also you'll notice on the second page really helped with a lot of the data that we had been asking at the start of this conversation of who is it that we want to hear from, who are we hearing from, do those match, and how can we do a better job of opening up our board spaces to be accessible, to be equitable, and intentional in the decision making that we need to do as a leadership body. And Lori was incredible in compiling data from the past several years, 2 years, 82 individuals to show up to testify, and really put it in a incredible spreadsheet on, you know, who those were, the areas, the topics that they showed up to testify in, and really kind of started the conversation in a way that's data driven, right? Given this information, we know that the answers to those questions that I just mentioned are that we could be doing a better job of increasing the access to those who don't traditionally have access to our boardroom, to us as individuals. And so these proposed changes are in front of you to solve for that issue. And so we went through, I would say, a very circular process, I guess, which is how it ended up happening, of fairly significant changes to the policies at first, and what I would characterize now, I'll kind of combine both of these topics, well, this item and then the second reading item right after this one, as minor changes, given that after, you know, extensive conversations with OSBA and district leadership and legal advice, really felt like a lot of the changes were more of practice, more of protocol. So that's what is reflected in the memo versus the changes that you'll see and we'll talk through in the actual board policies. And so to kind of clarify some of the changes that we've talked about before, there's kind of outlines. There's a fly here that's driving me crazy. In the protocol, so how our agenda will be better structured to provide for invited public input, again, making it clear that we are, given our goal of wanting to be accessible, wanting to hear from those most directly impacted, going to now invite those folks to our space instead of us expecting them to show up whenever works for them. We also, I will say, are in continuing conversations, and I'm particularly excited about this next year, and what does our space look like? Is that here in this boardroom? Is that in a different type of setting, whether it's a conference or a different school, et cetera? But we are planning out what that looks like in terms of those visiting delegations or now kind of invited public input. I think some other pieces that I've mentioned before that I know Lori is particularly excited about, that is more of a policy-related change in terms of minutes, will be kind of condensing the minutes so that she doesn't have to put down quite everything, given that now with technology, we're able to record the board meetings and streamline those changes. And then the final piece around accessibility and testimony that I'll mention that I think I've shared with most folks is around how we will be now reprioritizing who, we've never done this before, so prioritizing a preference of particular folks with particular identities to testify first if they choose to self-identify with some of these identities that we've identified, students, elders, persons needing interpretation or translation, and persons with accessibility needs, persons perhaps with younger children who may need to leave early. So we'll be in conversations with the district on changing the sign-up sheet. So again, should someone want to self-identify in these categories, we will be prioritizing them to give them the opportunity to provide their testimony to us. Let's see, what else? Just reading through this. I think that is generally everything. We also talked about some physical accessibility changes. Yes.
So, only to reiterate, when you say we will be doing this, you are implying that the next set of board leadership will review this.
Correct.
And bring something to that board as that board leadership's decision.
Yes. Thank you for
because nothing could be decided right now along these lines, unless you two are doing it for this meeting or the workshop.
It's because these are procedures, they're really not something we vote on. It's more a consensus around changing how we run some of our meeting, because it's not policy.
No, it's not. But who sets the agenda?
The board
by
leadership.
Policy. By policy, who sets the agenda?
And what we've decided to be more inclusive of the rest, respectful of the rest of the board, to be in the discussion versus we've had. I've had board leadership in the past make sudden changes that really were difficult for some board members.
And that's not the direction that we want.
Yeah, and we didn't want to do that. That's why there's been this discussion.
As it is board policy, board leadership sets the agenda. And so if we are talking about a meeting beyond this meeting or a potential workshop, we're talking theoretically, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I think that was, if I'm looking at this correctly, the majority of the points that I wanted to cover, but certainly feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or
I have
changes.
something.
Yeah, I think that's a big yes.
So, is the goal to have both attendee input and invited public input? And
No,
they're kind of the same thing, but we're inviting some people that haven't spoken in the past?
No, it's instead of, we're just renaming visiting delegations to invited public input.
Right. So, for example, the presentations that we heard just now would be classified under invited public input.
Okay.
They are group presentations, but we are talking through, I would characterize as a calendar, right, of are these the right folks we should be listening to, or are there other folks who, other board members might want to hear from? So,
So I think where I'm confused is, so in the general order of items, there's attendee input and invited public input, and then below it, the next paragraph is public input. And so I'm confused if this public input below is the invited public input, or is it
What page are you
on
she's on page 2. I know what you're saying.
Or is this attendee input?
It's only related to the attendee input.
So-
I can clarify.
So, yeah, if that could be changed, if it could say attendee input instead of public in the 2 spots. And then also my other comment on this is
that's helpful.
that testimony from students, elder persons, blah, blah, et cetera, that second bullet. If we could add parents of students in the district, because they're missing from this group, and sometimes they have something they want to tell us.
I'll put parents, guardians.
Yeah, on behalf of their child. So maybe their child's too little to come and talk, or not.
And that's something, because in the past when we had all those issues, we didn't know if half the people coming and talking even lived in our district. That's something on the sign-up sheet. Not asking people for their address, especially since we're streaming now.
Yeah.
But to just checkbox, or do you live in the district? Do you not?
Right,
You know,
and we
that
do
kind of
have
thing.
that in the third
Right.
bullet. That was also something that Frida had also shared, a David Douglas resident as a status, but I
that's
like
great.
the parent,
I just
guardian.
like to add a parent or guardian thing.
Okay.
And also up above, the things that we're going to take off, I'd really like to keep other business / future agenda items. I know it's, usually there's none, but occasionally there is something, and it gives people an opportunity to say, hey, I went to All Hands Raised and heard about this thing, I'd like a report on X. So I think that gives people the opportunity to say, hey, I've learned a little bit about something, and it would be great if we had a presentation on it.
Okay.
That's my comments.
Thank you.
A question, I guess. It doesn't really involve me because it was pointed out by Kyle's questions and his statement that it's going to be next month when this will be in effect, if not at the workshop at the end of the month. But anyway, the Native American land acknowledgement. I did, when this was first introduced a couple of months ago, I did a little bit of research to find out what that exactly is. I mean, it sounds like it's not a particular statement, or is it? I mean, it looks like it's sort of evolving as you want it to evolve.
I think that so the latter, absolutely. It's a continually evolving statement that varies, one, on physical location, depending on which tribal communities were part of, X location that you're in, and 2, on how those communities would like to be represented and reflected in the statement. And so the purpose of the statement in general, though, is just that, is to acknowledge that all of the work that we're doing, the physical space of our building, of our district, of the school in and of itself, is on Native land, and to acknowledge that Native communities and folks affiliated with actual tribes are still, part of the community. They are statements, and Frida and I went through a lot of this too, thinking that, you know, this should be something that should be read by someone who self-identifies as Native, and that's actually not necessarily the preference. I would say I've heard from other Native leaders. It's actually important for folks in leadership positions and leadership bodies like ourselves to make those statements as well. And so that's really the purpose, is to make that acknowledgement of the land. And Christine, you're also right that the language would have to be developed, although there are different examples, very short.
Yeah, as I told her,
examples.
shorter the better. From what I've
Couple
heard,
of
where
sentences.
people have done this, that it becomes, if you make it too long, it's not as, people tune it out.
Yeah.
So-
Well, I guess my question really is, you know, it doesn't sound like this will be a set statement like the Pledge of Allegiance is. It could change month to month.
No, not that evolving. So when I say evolving, I should clarify that that could mean, you know, the statement might change
generally.
you know, every couple of years. Just as I would say language for the LGBTQ community, just as the other one that's coming to my head, as you know, other communities want to be included in that acronym. But you know, for example, the tribes that we know, or the communities who have been part of David Douglas since, you know, before it was David Douglas, we're still, you know, here. So that part wouldn't change.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
On this subject, you know. So the Native American Land Acknowledgement Statement could replace the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, you know, I won't be here, but I'll just say that, you know, I've quite enjoyed, we're a diverse people by faith, by ethnicity, by goals, whatever. You know, sitting around this table, we're a very diverse people. And I've enjoyed standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance with Stephanie, who I don't know all that well, but I know, you know, we have things in common, we have differences. But this Pledge of Allegiance, and actually, I'm not just you, same thing with Christine, or with anybody around this table or in the room that chooses to stand, it's a statement that we make every month, and believe it or not, I feel that it binds us together, if we truly believe what we're saying and reciting. Now, I'm not saying that the land statement couldn't do the same. I don't know, but I just wanted to make that statement that as an outgoing board member, having been here for 6 years, I've enjoyed that very much. And with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I feel it's a uniting statement. So, and I'm not saying that the other one won't be a uniting statement. Don't get me wrong. As you probably all know, I'm not one that's easily accepted to change. But
change is hard for everybody.
But we're evolving, as Frida's mentioned.
The proclamation tonight and having that young gentleman speak just shows how much we've evolved, because I have 42 years history in this district, attending and seeing, and I can remember when we had teachers who, you knew they were gay, but they could not come out of the closet for fear of being fired. You know, and it's nice to know that isn't the case now. So there's some good of the changes that have been occurring, but I think some of the major changes are going to take that group of kids, Stephanie's, my granddaughter, in there, that are totally accepting of any child, and to really have change come to full fruition. So there's few older people who are just too set in their ways to change. So, but the one I was curious about on board reports, because she's suggesting we've had past boards have had this discussion too about board reports. So I won't do a written board report. I don't care. That was the last discussion we had on it, was to do written board reports. But if people are okay without them, you know.
I think if somebody went and did something really important or found something out really important, like Frida went to the city and they told her that they were gonna give our district $500,000 for TriMet passes or something, that you should report that. Or that they're gonna, you know, build a brand new multi-family housing, whatever. I mean, I feel like we have like the perfunctory board reports where I say, oh, the music program did really great. Or, you know, when Kyle's kids were here, something about the theater, whatever. But I think that if there's something like that we need to know, that somebody should kind of, at the end of the meeting, maybe in that other business, say, I have a report. I don't know.
It might be under other business rather than formal board reports.
Right, because I don't want to take away, I don't want to encourage people just to say something at the end of the meeting just because we go around and ask. But if, you know, Donna finds out something really great that she wants to share with us, or that, you know, has impact in our district for our kids, then that we should know about, then somehow we need to speak up. And I don't know if that's other businesses the mechanism for that, or what. I'll leave it at that.
And a reminder that, you know, anyone can add any agenda item. And so if it qualifies as something that folks feel like, you know, in this example, money was given, and then there needs to be a conversation at the board level in a meeting around what should we do with that money and how should we respond to the city. Absolutely, I think that's an appropriate way to get it on the agenda, to be transparent about that conversation in public. I do want to second what you also said, right? That I want to be more intentional about how we are using our meetings, and so not necessarily just going around to, you know, report out things that we could communicate with each other in different ways, and really be strategic in what we are bringing to the full board, and, you know, to the administration who's here as well. So I think, you know, other business, or, you know, if someone really does want to bring an actual item, could also be, you know, a presentation that we include in invited public input. So there's lots of mechanisms to do that, I think.
Okay. Anything else?
Question. And again, I won't be here. How do you reconcile the desire to be more inclusive with limits on the amount of time people can speak and people being able to speak about what they want to come and share with the board?
So in here, I believe I put, it's footnote 2, and it could also be somewhere else, some of the data that states, one, who in general shows up, and again, it's backed on our own data, who has shown up. Given the structure of our board meetings, it sets up certain folks who have access to the time of our board meetings, to their physical ability to testify, etc. And so when we say, you know, we are going to prioritize communities who we want to hear from, that does make a statement. And then in terms of your second piece of limiting the time, I will say that the time actually doesn't change. So we have kind of 15 minutes of the, what are we calling it? Attendee input, and then the public, or the invited public input is still the same amount of time. However, we, I think, can make it clear that if we are prioritizing those who we want to hear from, that it sets up the conversation differently. So in a lot of the other research that I heard or kind of looked up in similar bodies to school districts, city councils, county commissions, it was interesting to see that folks who predominantly showed up to the meetings were folks who had varying higher degrees, maybe in law, maybe in planning. And so when those folks showed up, there was also data that showed that then kind of intimidated other people from wanting to testify after them on a particular item because perhaps English was their second language, or perhaps they didn't have a degree, so they didn't feel quite as willing or able to have a conversation with the board on a topic. And so by saying that, we want to kind of hear from particular communities, I think we are opening up the space in a different way.
Right. So when there is no one else here besides the person who spoke last week, that person willingly took time to come and speak to the board. They're not able to.
No, they'd still be able
Same
to.
topic.
Oh, same topic.
Same topic. Right? So no, they won't be able to. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, please don't run into any hot buttons, but let's say you hit a hot button. You're going to limit those? Really? You have that sheet filled out completely, and you're going to limit them?
It is going to have topic on there because we do request, and many bodies do.
I understand.
If they're speaking on the same topic, say a group of them comes in, maybe 5 or 6 people, all to say the same thing, that we ask one person to represent them making the statement versus 5 or 10 people saying the exact same thing over and over again.
Okay.
And stuff. And that's not uncommon to do that when you have only so much time.
Can I ask, are you meaning if they come in together as an organized group, or just that 5 different people happen to come in to talk about the same thing, but they're individuals who came? Because if they're a representative of different communities, they're not necessarily going to say the same thing. They see through different lenses. They're experiencing the impact of different issues in different ways.
I'll give you an example. We've had it before in regard to the charter school. Okay, they came in and talked about they were prepared to talk about the exact same thing. Each one of them were from the charter school, and they were basically saying, that's what we're more looking at. And it'd be the rare case where we have a room full, as you can see, we don't have a room full of people. And it doesn't, knock on wood, doesn't happen too often in David Douglas to have a room full of people.
So it's making a distinction when you're talking about an organ, because to me that would be an organized group that came prepared together to do something, versus we're not saying that different people who did not do that could not happen to speak on the same topic.
And I would also add that one other change that we've checked in with Ken about is if there are, let's say, even one, but it could be a large group of individuals who come in on say it is a hot button topic, that board members really wanting to hear a report back as quickly as possible on the response that the district wants to see on that testimony, that Ken will include that information in his subsequent superintendent report. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that sorry, what?
By request.
Correct. So board members, so say, you hear something, you can follow up with Ken in whatever way is most comfortable for you and say, X individual giving Y testimony was important to me. I would like an update on steps being taken to address that testimony, and then he will include it in his superintendent report. And that was actually a piece of feedback that I actually initially talked with Donna about, but that other board members really felt comfortable with, again, given another issue in general that we've I think lots of folks have expressed to Frida and myself about the frustration of not knowing what happens when people come and testify, that we don't really have this kind of loop back around mechanism to know if the bathroom stall doors were installed or if the Sun School site managers, have resources. So that kind of information, in terms of those hot button items, will be the intention with some of these changes is to get that information so that ideally that person doesn't have to come back. We know that they have been followed up with.
Okay. And then my last one. It was a multi-page memorandum. So we're gonna be talking about BDDH here.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So testimony that doesn't follow that policy will be ended immediately.
That,
I want to be here that day.
that came from you.
Yeah, I want to be here that day.
I believe you're talking about the policy that limits, talking about personnel and stuff. Yeah.
That was a change that I had included. I don't even remember.
It's the one regarding staff members.
Right, but where?
We didn't change it.
Oh, we didn't change it. Right.
That's just one that's been in policy.
Right. Thank you. That's where it was. Yes. So, yes, that was something that had been in policy but hadn't been necessarily followed. And so I put that in there to restate that that is the policy. There's no changes to that because I still think that it should be, well, that's the proposal to you all, that I think that that should be something that is followed. It's for board to vote on.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you all so much for your patience. I know this was a really long process. I got sick and a lot of other things, but I am really, really appreciative of everyone's input. I think I talked with you all on the phone multiple times. Thank you.
Yeah, I really felt it was important that it was inclusive of all board members because, like I said, in the past, there's been some decisions made by leadership that affected other board members' ability to get on time, etc., and there was no discussion ahead of time. So I felt any major changes we make to a board, our board meeting should be agreeable to the body.
Madam Chair, can I say one thing? I just want to thank you for all the time that you've put into. I see many things in this change that we have brought up in the past, like over the past couple years I've been here, around accessibility, around childcare, around, food and making meetings, more user-friendly. I think I just want to recognize your work to bring these ideas forward. And I also look forward to talking to our new members next month. So thank you.
Well, I also we had some discussions about assigning schools to board members. In lieu of reports, there would be a liaison to each school. And I think that instead of a board member trying to figure out, how can I get to this or that, they can just focus on the couple of schools that are theirs. And we'll be letting the principals know who the liaison, so they can invite you to the different activities those particular schools have. So that'll be a change, and Andrea's going to be assigning those schools out to people.
The leadership.
Well, the leadership. I'm sorry. I know it. The leadership. Hey, as vice chair, I can make you assign them. Anyway.
That's true.
Yeah, I could make you assign them. I can, but anyway, that type of thing. We'll be doing that. And Ken's talking about, besides Your Voice Matters, looking at board members attending as maybe three board members attending different functions where people can come and talk to us, versus because so many people, they aren't going to come and sit at the table and talk. Well, it's hard. With streaming, it's a little harder to take the meeting somewhere. But but also if there's a international night at one of the schools, making ourselves available, with the interpreters, so that if someone wants to have a discussion with the board member, we're there and they're not having to come to us. So those are some of the things Ken's working on as well, is to try to figure out how to reach, because like I told Andrea, in all the years I've been on the board, unless there's a hot button item, people just don't tend to come to board meetings and speak much unless they've got an issue. So anyway, let's move on. If there's no more on that, we have our second reading on board policies BDDC, a board meeting agenda, policy BDDG, minutes of board meetings, and policy BDDH, public participation board meetings. We listened to what was commented last month, tried to incorporate them the best we could, the comments, and address the concerns. Is there any more input?
I have a question.
Sure.
And it relates back to the memo. So in BDDH, the heading audience crossed out public input. Does this mean, referring back to my memo, attendee input and invited public input?
I didn't catch.
Or is this something like just?
It's supposed to be, and I didn't catch that didn't get changed, because that was supposed to be changed not from audience input to attendee input.
As opposed to public.
As opposed to public.
And then it's.
That was a request of Stephanie's.
And then there's the procedures for public input.
Right.
Probably should be attendee input as well. Okay. I didn't have those comments last time because I didn't have this super long memo that that Andrea made while she was sick.
I thought we had caught that.
I'm just teasing you.
But we're going back and forth on these. I don't have to read any more proclamations, though. Oh, no. Anyway, is there any other changes other than the attendee input? And that was just a catch we didn't get. Okay, then do we vote on them after the second? Okay, then I need a motion to accept these changes to.
I move to accept the changes to policies BDDC, BDDG, BDDH.
With the change from public to attendee.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's. Oh, you abstained. Okay. I'm not sure why. Oh. Hey, we've been going around with those policies for a bit, so I'm finally glad to get those off the table. Okay, we're down to other business. I wanted to remind you, you have a copy of a blank superintendent evaluation form in your packet. Well, just because you did yours already doesn't mean anything. Anyway, I had to pull it out. Here it is. Okay. We are having our evaluation, superintendent evaluation, which is required for us to do on what would normally be our workshop day, June 27th. I need to know, do you want, I'm asking you because I'm flexible. I don't work, so I'm flexible. You want to meet at 6, you want to meet at 6:30, you want to meet at 7? No, evening. The 27th. We usually spend at the most an hour. 6:30. You guys like the 6:30 time?
I like whatever time Lori sends out.
Okay. 6:30 work for everyone? Okay, then we'll do the 6:30 time. And it usually only takes about an hour. Yeah. And it's good if you write your comments down and bring them with you, because it helps Lori when Lori takes all our comments together in our discussion and compiles them into one document that we approve. So, and it's helpful to her.
So when do you need the edits by?
Oh, no, bring it with you. Just bring it with you on the 27th.
Okay.
And
where are we meeting?
Oh,
Are we meeting at the district office?
Let's meet at the district office while I open this.
You know, I'm going to vote the district office every time.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
closer to you.
That was a 5-minute drive.
Donna's got the farthest to go.
Also, traditionally, just for awareness for everybody, sometimes there are things that you share in the evaluation as part of the formal evaluation, and then there are also the opportunity to have side notes that if you define them
as side notes,
they will go directly to Ken or to the superintendent, right? So.
Yeah. And both of you, Aaron and Sahar, you're invited to join us so you can see how we do an evaluation, because next year you'll be doing it. So we'll hold it at district office 6:30 on the 27th.
Yeah, and that might be my office. We'll book one of the training rooms, but if they're full, which they shouldn't be, this group would fit in my office.
Yeah, we could easily do it in your office. No reason to book.
Yeah, Lori's computer's right.
Yeah, we can just do it in your office. Okay, is there any, other business? Yes, there was, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I remember other business floating around, but now I've got it all messed up in my pile, Pat.
There's 2 items for contracts, and you could probably do them together if you want to. One is for Row Health, and it's a contract for next year. One is increasing a contract for this year.
Okay, do I have a motion to increase the contract for the POIC Rosemary Anderson High School and the approval of the contract for Row Health, Inc. regarding nursing services for the MECP?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, a question for Pat. Pat, just when you have time, I looked, and I apologize, I could not find the policy that defines where we have client services. You and I talked about that briefly. Can you send me that policy, or will you track it down? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're done with that. Okay. This may be the last time, but I'm going to ask for board member reports. Christine?
I would just like to thank everybody who did both of the wonderful graduation ceremonies, the high school and the Fur Ridge campus ones. I know it's a lot of work for folks. I think that, our staff put in a lot of extra time to pull those off, and they do it with grace and a pleasant attitude, which makes all the difference when things go a little bit wrong, but not really noticeable. So I would like to thank them all and congratulate all our graduates.
Do you mean a little bit wrong, like when board members try to exit out through the wrong exit they're not allowed to exit out of?
Or like when there's not enough diplomas? Right.
So this being my last official board meeting, I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who have put up with me. And I guess it goes both ways, put up with you too. I had to say that. No,
we haven't roasted you yet.
David Douglas School District, it means an awful lot to my family and to I think that, over the various meetings we've had over the years, I've told you I've lived in this district since 1981. So what's that, 38 years. Raised 6 children who went K through 12. The David Douglas, I went to Grant High School here locally in Portland, and I had friends that went to David Douglas at the time back in the 70s, and David Douglas was a good district. So when my wife and I moved back to the Portland area in 1981, it made sense. I was close to Mount Hood where I could go skiing, and David Douglas I had good memories, and I know that some of you are graduates of the high school as well, attended the school district, and well, I don't know about now, but some
Past board members.
past board members and past members of the cabinet. And, you know, it just, there's a culture in David Douglas that was something that was very important to us anyway when we made the decision where we wanted to live. And so, hey, 38 years later, here we are. And, but we will be moving soon. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and it's just been a privilege to be associated with all of you. Thank you very much. That's it.
Like I said, we haven't roasted you yet.
Is it okay if I give my equity committee report as part of this instead of waiting until?
Sure you can.
So, no. Okay. No. Okay. Pass.
You're passing.
So we had an equity committee meeting today. The policy is getting closer and closer. That's all I have to say. I hope I get to be on the equity committee next year. That's it.
Kyle, you want to give your last report?
Yes, I do. So first, board report. I had 7 different parents come up and say that they received the pitch during their end of school concerts from the music department, and they did very much want me to share with the board how much they appreciate the board's dedication to the music program. So that it's not just me going and seeing my kids, right, but that's parents out in the community. And it's also a great sales pitch by all the people in the music department. That's really it. I'm sure that I'll have the opportunity to talk with all of you individually at some point. It has been great. It really has. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Wouldn't trade it one bit. I've thought about it a couple times, right? If I could have just not gone to Alisat that day that Florence was sitting in the office and said, how do parents get involved, right? I could have avoided all of this. But no, that's not how it worked. So it has. It's been great. I look forward to those comfy chairs and navigating this new way to sign up for testimony. Oh, that's at what point do I qualify as an elder? Like, how long do I have to go?
You have a ways to go, mister.
All right, thank you.
Donna? Okay. Anything?
I will say thank you again to everyone for your input in the procedure changes. I'm really excited about the actual policy changes. And also thank you to everyone for your collaboration on the proclamations. I was particularly moved by this one, as I am with all of them, and really looking forward to the subsequent years of the proclamations and continuing to get your feedback and thoughts and suggestions on how to continue our leadership in issuing those. So thank you for your leadership there. I know that I've heard from other folks in the community that they are really looking to us in what these statements mean and how we're moving, I think, the dial more so than other areas. And so thank you all for doing that.
In case this is my last board report. I wanted to share with you, sometimes when you're chairman and you try to represent the school board at functions, this last 2 weeks have been a little bit busy with attending this year-end district office brunch, classified bargaining, 2 graduations, the district retirement gathering, as well as being a representative on quite a few of the things that are happening in Gateway, so we can be kept informed. And also, I was able to attend the community garden dedication, which was really good. Yeah, it was really good, and I was really surprised because of all the plots they have. They only had 6 open as of Saturday. All of the other ones had been taken already. Yeah, so. And they said if there was ones open, they wanted to plant vegetables that could be used in the food bank. So they they didn't go unused. So it was really great. We do have this. Do we share doing this?
I'd love to share with you, but yeah.
Okay. No, I haven't hit the adjournment. I said I haven't roasted you guys yet. I haven't roasted you yet. It's not an agenda item. It's
Madam Chair, we could exit the meeting and then just do it unofficially. If we're gonna, there's other ways to do this. Yeah.
This is part of my report. Okay. Did you want to
I'd
have
love
that?
to.
I'm
I'd
gonna
love to.
have, and then we can talk.
So technically, I know Kyle's gonna probably find something wrong with what I said here, but we have two individual board members that have talked about in their board reports that this is their last or close to their last board meeting. We'll call it regular board meeting. Our next board meeting we know is an executive session. So this is your last regular board meeting, and I guess I get to take the privilege to start with to recognize your work, recognize your dedication, commitment to the district. I try to say it as often as I can. I recognize his volunteer service, and I recognize that it comes from the heart. It's about the kids, it's about the community, it's about believing that what we do matters in our school district, and I personally believe that you exude that. You exude that every day, and every conversation I've ever had an opportunity to have with you is very focused around what's best for kids. I don't think I ever heard anything that was agenda-based. Open mind. We were talking today somewhere clear mind, full heart. And anyway, the point is I get the privilege of thanking you, Kyle, for 7 years of service on the David Douglas School Board. And I know there was CAC before that. I know there was probably lots of T-ball before that. And a lot of different opportunities through the way. But I know this plaque says 7 years on the David Douglas School Board. So I'd open it up to anyone else, but I do want to shake your hand and say thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I have to say, Kyle, I've appreciated you for your interest in curriculum and getting into the schools. I've learned over the years, as board members, we evolve in our interests. I started out with similar interests, and now mine have broadened mine to the wider community that affects our school district. But it takes each of us in our interests to make us a full board and bring in our expertise to it. But I've really appreciated the 7 years you've been here. And I did enjoy doing the speed bargaining with you. Is there any other comments?
I'll go. I have, so thank you also for your service to the district. And particularly, I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but Kyle was actually the first person that I met on the board before, when I very first moved into the district, actually. Previously, and I worked for Commissioner Novick. And since then has been a person who I've gone to repeatedly for insight in not only policy, but details on programs and your analysis, quite frankly, on how our district does business with, the students' best interest in mind. And one of the things that I've really appreciated that you've taught me as a leader is how important it is to build relationships with my colleagues on the board, knowing that, our relationships are not just one vote long, but they're, a whole term long. And, we certainly haven't seen eye to eye on everything, but we've taken votes together on many policies. I've really appreciated your support when we were early on in my initial board leadership on the inclusion resolution, on the comprehensive healthcare services, on really a lot of these policies and kind of initiatives that I've had the pleasure of working on in the district, but that you really did play a key role in. And so I really want to acknowledge your work and your dedication there, knowing that, those were very different opinions there, and really our shared interest was what was best for the students, what was best for the district and our community. And I really, really appreciate that lesson from you. I'm disappointed really to see you go. I am am hoping and praying that I have learned enough parliamentary procedure, but I am probably, have not. So you'll continue to get calls from me, and really, it's been quite a pleasure. So thank you so much. And one other thing that I'll say is, as the first and only person of color on the board for a while, it was really nice to know that even though we didn't see eye to eye, that I know that you respected me. I know that you appreciated my leadership. And to be quite honest, that was very huge for me as someone who constantly felt out of place and like I wasn't an actual leader. And so I really, really appreciate that. It meant a lot to me. And so thank you so much for the work that you've put into this district. Again, volunteer work. And we are looking forward to seeing you back as an elder.
She got that in.
Start yet? I wasn't sure. I was antsy.
Any other comments? Anyone
One
else?
thing, I'm going to miss your quick draw on the So Move second. And I am going to start going to YouTube and watching a bunch of Robert's Rules videos because I don't know either. No, it's really been a pleasure to get to know you, and I'm sad that we never had our backyard barbecue, but hopefully we will at some point. We had talked about having kind of our families and broader community come together and not do anything boardy, but just kind of be. And I think people don't do that enough, especially across differences and religion and race and all that. So, yeah, really great.
And I'll just say I really appreciated when you were chair and I was vice chair. It was very new for me to be on board leadership, so I felt like I got a lot of good guidance from you and, felt like I was somewhat prepared to be chair the next year. Although, as many have talked about, the Robert's Rules of Order, I kind of feel like you need to come to meetings and sit in the audience and kind of shout out or maybe the new board members are Robert's Rules experts. But we are really going to miss that. But I really do. I really want to say I really appreciate you being the chair when I was vice chair because it was a good example for me and really helped me. So thank you.
Any other comments? I'm just going to make one thing on Robert Rules. This is how long I've been around. At one time, the assistant superintendent was, what do they call it, sergeant at arms, that was supposed to know all about Robert's Rules of Order so they could tell the board if they were doing something incorrectly.
I second.
I just told Candy she could tell Andy since he's not here tonight that that's his job.
That's just a little historical piece. Yes, well, that's basically what I think that's what, I think, for lack of a better word, that was historically how it was done. Anyway, we have one more to give.
Again, this time we're talking 6 years of service, but recognition, Bryce. Ultimately, I think a lot of the conversation to start with is the same. And what I mean by that is the volunteer work and the heart in the district. There's no doubt in my mind your belief in our schools, in our teachers, in our community. And one of the things when I first kind of came to this district, or when you were first on the board, I don't know, one or the other, but kind of how I first got to know you, it's kind of interesting, was I don't remember exactly, but it was through conversations with administrators and teachers in this district talking about your kids and how amazing they were. And I've only had the opportunity to meet one, but I think a reflection, I mean, that just says so much when after they were long gone out of school, one of the first things that the administrators and teachers came and talked to me about is, oh, Bryce's family is so dedicated and communicated to this district, but then they just raved about your kids, amazing kids, and I truly believe that's our number one job. There's many parents here at this table, and that's number one, right? That's our priority, and I think that says a lot. So I know that's kind of sliding out of the board role here, but ultimately that meant a lot to me, knowing that what you stood for and your belief, and Again, your service, dedication, voice, leadership, I've appreciated. And I know I've only been superintendent 2.5 years, and well, I guess this is 3 years, end of 3 years. So I'm still kind of new, learning from all of you, but I so appreciate all your work and everything you've done. So for 6 years of service, Bryce, thank you.
Well, Bryce, I appreciate the time you served on the board. We didn't always agree on everything, but I personally feel that's what makes the board what we are, that we can respectfully listen to each other's viewpoints. And once we come to a vote on something, that even if it isn't something you would normally support, you support the board's vote. And I think that's really important. So I've really appreciated the time you've spent here. Any other comment, Kyle?
Yeah. So Bryce, first, thank you, obviously, for all of your efforts and work. I want you to know that in my time on the board, and certainly any time that I had to sit over any of those chairs, I took cues from you and your presidency, and in ways in working with others and including others. It was very meaningful, great lessons that I learned from you. I also, I guess I'll say in parting, I wish there was opportunities in board meetings for more humor, because you've got a great sense of humor that doesn't come across sometimes, right? We've had that, but it's just been a great joy. I have agreed with you on almost everything, so that's where we come to that place where if all your friends agree with you, it's time for new friends, right? So. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sorry to hear that you're moving, but I'm sure you guys have great reasons, and I'm sure it's family based, and it's going to be amazing. So, thank you.
So I'll probably always think of the flag salute now, and think of you, and I'm happy to do it anytime. So thank you so much for your service to the district. Appreciate it.
I do think that Bryce's humor did come out a little bit when we were interviewing board candidates last time, and he brought up the issue about if they had anything in their background that would embarrass the board. He really can roll with kind of what's happening and with pleasantness. So I think you're very kind, and I think that kindness came out a lot of times in the board meetings. Like Frida said, the ability to kind of, even if we don't agree, we're still going to respect what's happening, what the vote is of the board. So I really appreciate that, and I too wish you well in your move. I'm always happy for people that are making big life changes. Especially if you're moving closer to your family, which I think that might be what this is. So, I wish you well.
And I'll share also that, again, thank you so much for your 6 years of service. That's an incredible amount of time, and it was really great to hear kind of your commitment that you shared early on about how much David Douglas has meant to you over the years, and not only during the time of your service, but certainly before then. And that's always really incredible to hear from others who have been able to raise their families here. And best of luck in your move and in that next chapter of your life with your family. And we'll certainly welcome you as well in public participation.
Any other comments? Okay, we're having 2 board members leave us and 2 new ones coming on, so we look forward to both Sahar and Aaron joining the table next month. It's going to be different, as I told Aaron, is when I started out, I was the only woman, and it was all men, and now we're going to have 1 man and all women. So we talk about change. It's a major change for David Douglas for that to occur. So if there's no other business, I'm adjourning this.